My friend likes to go mushroom foraging, and one time she brought me with her. We got further and further into the woods, getting distracted by cool rocks or different mushrooms or a cool stick or even just by talking. We were having a great time, just the two of us, until we stumbled into a clearing where a man was sitting, skinning what looked like a deer. I was frozen for a second. I only moved to this yeehaw-ass town about a year and a half ago. I'm from the Bronx, where you can see some weird shit, but I'm definitely not used to hunting culture. My friend and I were just sort of frozen. The man looked up, covered in blood, and said, "You know it's not safe for girls like you out here, right?" Then he let out a raspy laugh, instantly chilling my bones. He picked up his frighteningly large knife and just kept skinning the deer and muttering about all the dangerous animals in these woods. My friend and I were just nodding, not sure what else to say or do. He looked back up at us and said, "There's bears, sure. The mountain lions, the fisher cats, and the rabid coons, but the most dangerous thing out here?" He leaned forward and pointed the knife. "Man, the most dangerous game there is." My friend and I made eye contact and just booked it, running through the woods, through bushes and thorns, and eventually we found our way back to her property. Not sure if creepy hunter guy was just scaring us for shits and giggles, but fuck, it was creepy. I'd like to think he just got fun out of scaring two teenagers, but Jesus Christ, not in the mood for this dude to pull a fucking Robert Hansen. Friday, December 5th, 1980, my son was 2 weeks old and we were low on food, so I went to the commissary on Fort Ord, California. I waited in line about 15 minutes, showed my military ID at the door, went in and shopped. When done, I got in line to have it rang up and pay. A very old Asian, Vietnamese, I believe, came up and asked, "Boy?" I said yes. Then she started playing with his face and saying, "Deet deet doo," etc. I didn't pay much attention. I was young and ignorant. I bent down to get the 20-pound sack of potatoes and put them on the conveyor belt, and she was gone. Something told me to check on Christopher, so I unfolded his blankets, and he was gone. I looked around frantically, and a girl with shoulder-length blonde hair and hazel green eyes about 20 feet away said, "Hey, lady, she's got your baby, and she's heading for the door." I've been thankful these years that the lane I was in was farthest from the door, about 50 to 70 feet. I sprinted for that door, throwing every person standing in my way. I caught that bitch. She saw she wasn't going to make it with him, so she turned at the door, came back in, and kept saying, "I show baby candy. I no take baby." Just as I got to her, I saw a car outside the door at the curb, an old Asian man at the wheel, and the passenger door open. He got a look of horror, panic, fear on his face, and punched it. It was running, in gear and ready. The passenger door slammed shut as he sped away. I grabbed my son from her and was already pummeling her before she'd let go of him. I was beating the crap out of that bitch when some men pulled me off her. Then I started kicking her, too. The whole time I was yelling at everyone to call the MPs. Bitch was very swollen and bloody. Why was that civilian who checked IDs at the door so insistent that no one call them? I wondered. Just then a lady came in and said she'd used the payphone at the end of the outside wall and they were coming. The first MP came up and I was yelling at him to shut down the post, stop an old Asian man in about a 1970 cream-colored Impala. He did as I asked, no question. As soon as he let off the mic, front gate said he'd tried to crash and run through the gates. They got him. When interviewed, old woman had no military ID. How did she get into the commissary then? She says she bribed the civilian at the door $20. Aha, that explained why he was acting so funny. I demanded he get written up, yelling at the boss man there. He was fired on the spot, crying. I had no sympathy. I told him and his boss if I ever see him back in any civilian position on post, I'd kick his ass, then get all the rest of them fired too. I was assured he would never work there again. Good. That young MP was about 20 and tried to help me. The others were trying to let her go. Why? He told me at the military police station that the old Asian couple had kidnapped dozens of children around the world, most on American military bases, and they were wanted in many countries for being part of a baby-stealing ring. My son would have been sold for $50,000. I pushed for more information. He quietly asked me if I had ever heard of Michael Aquino. I said no. He told me Aquino is a colonel who is highly connected, and he runs a Satan-worshipping cult in the army. It was connected to him. I wondered why the older police officers were trying to let them go, and witnessed some very odd things on Planet Ord in the years after. I was born and raised in that area, stayed after my husband got out of the army. Like when girls were being kidnapped and raped on base, and military police, local police, and newspapers refused to tell the public. So I printed up a few thousand flyers on my parents' printer. They had a produce growing company, and me and other wives went and have them out all over the base being told to stop, but doing it in every neighborhood anyway. I told them from that day at the commissary that I wanted to testify, take this to court. Even the other women in line, dozens, said they'd testify also. I called and called, no progress. They kept putting me off. Finally, I got hold of that first young MP, and he asked me to meet him, so I did at a beach in Seaside. He didn't mess around. As soon as I got out of my car, he said, "Take this as a warning. Let it all drop. Your family will be in great danger, and you are pissing off some very important people." I asked, like who? Who is so big that they can get away with this? Aquino. My father knew a lot about many bad people. He was connected, if you know what I mean. I asked my father about Aquino, told him about it, and he told me to drop it with a cold, stern, serious as hell look. So I did. A few nights ago, my daughter, 20, and I, 44, were at home together. It was just us girls because my son, my nephew, who lives with us, and my boyfriend were out. The night was cold and rainy. My daughter was in the kitchen baking, and I was chatting with her for a bit. I realized that it was getting late, a little after 10 p.m., so I decided to go take a shower. I went into my ensuite and had just turned the water on when I heard my daughter calling me in a hushed but frantic tone. I threw on my robe and came out of my bedroom. She told me that someone was on the deck knocking on the door. This was very strange for a few reasons, but especially because you have to come all the way into my yard and around the side of the house to get to the deck. I was immediately alarmed. It was late, we weren't expecting anyone, and any normal person would go to the front door. The door to the deck is solid, but there's a window right next to it. I peeked through the window and saw a large man with his hood up, and he was carrying a bag. He had just started knocking again. I said, "Hello?" And he responded, "Yes, can you open the door, please?" I asked, "Who are you looking for?" He said, "Can you please open the door so that we can talk?" I repeated more sternly, "Who are you looking for? Do you know someone who lives here?" He said, "I'm looking for a woman. Are you a mother? Please just open the door." At this point, I was ready to call the police, but realized that I had left my phone in the bathroom. My daughter was standing nearby, watching all of this happen with a very worried look on her face. I shouted, "You need to leave right now." He didn't reply, but he continued to stand at the door in silence for what felt like a long time. I whispered to my daughter, "Go grab my phone from the bathroom." And just then he walked towards the stairs to leave. I ran into the living room, which has a window that faces the front of the house, and watched as he walked out of the yard. It dawned on me that the deck is attached to the kitchen and he could have been watching us through the window before he started knocking. We were so shaken. When the guys came home, we told them what happened. They were as concerned as we were. My nephew happens to be a police officer. They immediately went outside to search the yard, but the strange guy was long gone. We are buying external cameras for the house this weekend. I had been dealing with harassment from a guy friend of mine, and I ended up snapping. It happened 3 weeks ago Friday. I was leaving school and was in the parking lot when he ran up to me and yelled, "Hey, tits!" His friends started laughing and making rude gestures, so I fucking shoved him. He wasn't expecting it and fell to the ground, where he promptly got pissed out of his mind. I don't know how to describe it, but he got a dangerous look in his eye. You know, when a man's too angry to say anything and looks calm, but his eyes are filled with hatred. It was chilling. His friends laughing at him in the background, his fury that was just so silent. Then it was like a switch flipped. His eyes went dead. I don't know how else to describe it. You know when you see a dead fish at a supermarket? That's what it was like. He stood up, brushed himself off, and backed me against a car. Before I could say anything, he leaned down and whispered, "You're going to regret that. You're going to slip up one day, and I'll be there, and I'll teach your stupid whore self a lesson you won't forget. Don't be friends with guys." Edit. Since all the nice guys are getting offended at that last sentence, it's because I treated him like a normal person. Because when we were assigned as lab partners and I smiled and said hi, he thinks he's entitled to me. Entitled to put me through horrible bullshit, to touch me, to make jokes about drugging me. Not all men, yeah, but definitely this fucking guy. This might not be your typical creepy encounter, and please delete it if it's not allowed here, but this has kept me up for a few nights now. For some background, I'm a male in my late 20s living in northern Canada. Last weekend, I got a call from a friend telling me that while on his skidoo ride, he went by my cabin as it was on his route and that it looked like someone broke into it and smashed out all the windows. Devastated, I went to my shed to load up my skidoo and sled with boards and tarps to repair the windows, hopeful to keep some of the snow out of my cabin until I can properly replace the windows in the spring. Just as I was about to leave, I got this gut feeling that something was wrong and that I should take a rifle just in case. Better to be safe than sorry. As I started my ride into the woods, I noticed the sky getting darker and think to myself, great, now I'll have a storm to deal with too. Luckily, it wasn't a snowstorm, but a thick fog that rolled in fast. There is nothing more unsettling than being alone in the woods, encased in a thick fog, especially with God knows what around you. I finally get to my cabin, and sure enough, all of my windows are smashed. I unload my gear and get to work, trying to get my cabin secure as fast as I can and get the hell out of there. At some point, I feel like I'm being watched, which gives me a lump in my throat because I can't see anything in this fog. I hear something moving around the trees and automatically grab my rifle and put my back to the cabin, hoping that if something comes out of the fog, I'll be ready for it. My first thought was it was the asshole who broke into my cabin, coming back under the cover of the fog to see what else they could take. But then I realized that no skidoo approached me, as I would have heard one from miles away as it was so quiet out there. After waiting a while with no more noises coming from the woods, I go back to work, get my windows fixed, and return back to my skidoo to get the hell out of there. After a short ride, I notice something that looks like potholes in the middle of the trail. Turns out to be polar bear tracks leading towards my cabin. That creepy feeling of being watched and the noises from the woods was a polar bear stalking me and was the actual culprit of the break-in at my cabin. What disturbs me most is that I would never see it coming with all that fog that day, and my rifle would be practically useless against such a big animal. To this day, I feel lucky to be alive. I was in 7th grade. Didn't have much friends because I used to hang out with high school kids. I was pretty alone at school because I never liked anyone in my class. That year, a new teacher came. He was 55 or 56. Always bragged about being rich, how he used to be a military pilot and so on. When someone asked him, "If you're so rich, why are you a teacher?" he replied with, "Because I love children." No one thought of that as a creepy thing. I mean, a lot of people genuinely love kids in a non-weird way. However, he was always extremely touchy with some students. He would give better grades to some girls, only a few, including me. I never let him touch me, but he would hold my hand or pet my head. The thing is, his relationship with me was different, and I could feel it. I had no one to talk to in my class, and he took the advantage of me being alone. He would shower me with compliments, tell me I'm the prettiest in the class, say I'm special. He even decided to talk to my mom about how much he likes me. At some point, it started to get weird, and a girl who was a lesbian in my class started to hang out with me. He didn't like that. He would gossip to other students to get away from us. Just some weird shit, and he also decides to give both of us bad grades and didn't want to teach us. He basically refused it. That girl and I became good friends, and one day she said, "Oh, I wish he doesn't come to class tomorrow. That's my birthday wish." I laughed and agreed. The next morning, we sit in the classroom, and suddenly the principal and some other teachers came to tell us that the teacher died yesterday due to a heart attack. I still think about it, and it's so strange. By the way, his wife was 29 years old. Nearly 2 years ago, my husband and I moved to a pretty safe town. We decided to have some fun while we're young and child-free, so we got an apartment downtown. It's super fun. It's on top of a shopping center with restaurants, boutiques, a theater, all kinds of stuff. We've had a blast living here and have always felt very safe. I like to go on walks. Since the area is so busy, I've always just walked here when I'm alone. I go on a walk about every other day, less in the winter. Anyway, for 2 years I've seen this older man sitting in the shopping center. He always gave me a really bad feeling, so if I came upon him I tried to divert my path. But I felt bad for judging. I said maybe I'm just paranoid. Maybe he's old and lonely and wants to be out around people. Well, the other night there was a shooting in the shopping center. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and I never go out that late by myself, so I didn't even know about it until the next morning. It turns out that same older man had kidnapped a woman in the shopping center at gunpoint, assaulted her, and tried to drive away with her. Her husband drove after them and shot at the guy. She was rescued, and he is in jail. He admitted to the police that he's been stalking that shopping center for victims, watching the women around there. I cannot tell you how many times in the past 2 years I've crossed paths with this man, how many times I felt guilty for feeling uncomfortable around him, how many times I was right in his path, an easy target. Always trust your gut. Always. I live in a not-so-great area in Cleveland, Ohio. This story happened to me about 3 weeks ago, and I was homebound from work because I was sick. I was sitting in my kitchen eating cereal when I noticed a black van parked opposite the street of my house. There were like 3 people in it, but I just assumed it had something to do with one of my neighbors. I keep my house deadbolted anyways and have a gun and an alarm system. I was watching YouTube on my phone when it rang with an unknown number. I picked it up asking who it was, and it was a woman. She asked, "Is this my name?" I said yes, and she kept talking, telling me that girlfriend's name was in a bad car crash and was severely injured. She told me I needed to come as quickly as possible as I may not have a lot of time left. After hearing that, I sort of became manic. I grabbed my car keys and wallet and ran to my car to start driving to the hospital. I got halfway down the street when I realized I didn't even know what hospital, so I tried calling the number again, but they didn't pick up. I copy and pasted the number into Google, and a hospital didn't come up, just a bunch of random shit. I tried calling my girlfriend's number, and she picked up immediately. It's embarrassing, but I was crying, and I asked her what happened and if she was okay. She said she was fine, and when I mentioned the hospital, she said she had no idea what I was talking about. I was really confused and couldn't really process what was happening, but I turned around and went home. When I got in view of my house, I saw the black van parked backwards into my driveway. It wasn't fully clicking in my dumbass brain what was happening, but I knew well enough they had no reason to be in my driveway. When I drove over, there was only one dude in the car now. The other two were literally right at my front door, which I had forgotten to lock when I ran out to my car. They were all wearing beanies and face masks, so it was hard to actually see what they looked like besides their eyes. When they saw me pull next to their van, the two started running back over to my car, and we all started having a shouting match. It was basically me screaming, "What the fuck are you doing parked in my driveway?" and them telling me to shut the fuck up. We kept doing that when one of them flashed a pistol at me and threatened to shoot me. As soon as I saw the gun, I floored my gas pedal and fumbled to dial 911 as I drove. I could see them pulling out in my rear view, driving in the opposite direction out of the neighborhood. The police still came, and I gave them a description of the van and the clothes they were wearing. I also managed to memorize like half their plate, but I doubt they were real anyways. I had so much adrenaline pumping through my body I was shaking. I filed a report with them, but haven't heard back since. It's just kind of the way it is around here, sadly. Either way, I was really startled because not only did they know where I lived, but obviously they were the caller and somehow knew my name, my girlfriend's name, and that I was home from work. That shit scared the hell out of me, and now I have a Ring doorbell system. I also triple-check my doors are locked every time I leave the house now. I pray to God some shit like that never happens to me again because it was horrible. My mom's dog, Punky, R.I.P., was a very sweet, loving dog. She was an ESA dog, but trained to be a service dog for PTSD before she lost her leg. I had never seen her get aggressive with anyone in the entire 12 years she lived. She never growled or nipped anyone, and she had no sense of smell, so she loved all animals and people, a real gentle giant among our little terriers at 60 pounds. What I'm getting at here was that her barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once. I, an 11-year-old female, was at home with my siblings, 2-year-old male and 6-year-old female. My then stepdad was at work, and my mom ran up to the gas station to grab a pack of cigarettes. It was only a mile or two away from us. For reference, we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer in the middle of the woods on a dead-end road at the time, and you had to really make an effort to get down our road, find our house, navigate down our rickety driveway, and find the door. I'm sitting at the computer, having a grand time watching YouTube videos, when all of a sudden, all of our dogs, about 2 Boston Terriers and 1 Chihuahua, perk up, bark a few times, and start investigating down the hall. My siblings were napping in the bedroom at the end of the hall at the time, so I figured they just stirred and scared the dogs. But then Punky sits up suddenly, stands up on the couch, and puffs her chest out. Her ears are perked up, her fur standing on end, her tail straight up, and then she barks loudly. I mean, the bark booms through the living room and echoes around, and all of a sudden she lunges off the couch and goes tearing down the hallway. I'm already on edge because I don't think I've heard her bark ever. She's a Basenji mix, so her bark is more of a baying sound, but this was a big, loud, alert bark. I stand up and go to look down the hallway, ready to fight off what I'm assuming is a shadow monster in the hallway based on how the dogs are acting, but then I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. We didn't get visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 11-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The only people who showed up were family, and they didn't knock, so I slowly walked towards the door. The knock drew the attention of the dogs, and they came running back down the hallway, all except for Punky. And I felt better with our 3 yappy dogs in the room with me, even if they were all the size of New York City sewer rats. I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch is the sketchiest man I think I've ever seen. I can still picture him perfectly. He was a really thin, taller man with dark hair and a sunken face, bags under his eyes, and this half-managed hair, sort of like he just gave it a quick brush and then figured it was good enough. Everything about him seemed just a little too thin, a little too shallow, and his clothes were all off too. They were nice, but fake nice, you know? Like a clean, newer-looking t-shirt and new jeans, but he had what looked like a suit jacket on. All his clothes were dark, too, despite the fact that it was summer in Texas and the weather was definitely into the hundreds that day. He also had this plain, unlabeled bottle in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and taped over. I stare up at him in confusion because I definitely don't know this man, and I ask what he wants. He smiles at me in this way that's way too fake, like this exaggerated and forced grin, and he spoke in the same voice retail workers do. "Hey there, kiddo, I'm trying to sell this here carpet cleaner." And he shakes the bottle at me. "Mind if I come in to show you how it works?" Alarms are going off in my head because he just seemed so off. Looking back with an adult perspective, the fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home is unnerving, because he probably knew they weren't, and that's why he was here in the first place. I should have told him to get off our property, that I'd have to go get my mom, something except what I did say, but didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, "No, we don't have carpet." "Well, it works on other things." And he took a big step towards the door and shook the bottle at me. I start to freak out and think to close the door, but the thing is, our front door didn't even lock. Small town, hard to access home, we never needed a lock, so that's basically useless. I'm sure there's something very wrong about to happen, and I'm terrified as I think about what to do in the few seconds I think I have before it does happen, when all of a sudden I hear it. Punky had crept up from the hallway, lowered towards the ground with her teeth bared and snarling like she was feral. She had slobber just dripping from her mouth, her ears were down, and she was ready to pounce. The guy hears it too, and as I look towards Punky, she tries to lunge past me, and I just barely catch her with my leg as she tries her hardest to duck past me and attack this guy. He freaks out and runs off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway as I let Punky out along with the rest of our dogs, and they start chasing him. Our small dogs chase him down the driveway and stop about halfway, barking and jumping about, but Punky stops just on the porch and watches him with her ears perked, just staring in the distance until he disappears. I swear I saw someone join up with him running when he got onto the road. The second he disappeared, Punky's entire body language changed, and she went back to being the sweet dog I knew. No barking or growling, just laying around, mouth and throat covered with slobber still. I realize my siblings are still down the hall and run to check on them, and when I get to the bedroom, my siblings were sleeping soundly still. But the bedroom window was wide open, the curtains pushed all to one side, and the items on the dresser in front of the window all shoved around. Someone had tried to climb through the window, no doubt in my mind about it. From what I can gather, the bedroom window was visible from the couch where Punky was sleeping, so I think someone was trying to climb through the window before Punky went after them and scared them off, and the man at the door was meant to distract me. They definitely didn't expect Punky, a bigger dog, because most of the time she was with my mom inside, while our small dogs were the ones that saw public eye more often. I don't know what they intended to do, but after my mom got home, she took all of us to my aunt's house, and on our way there, we saw the men walking up someone else's driveway. Men, plural, because we watched a second one split off to wait by the road. So to the two men apparently going door to door to sell their unlabeled carpet cleaner, I'd rather not meet again. Hello, my Vickies. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed already, please do and hit the like button, as they're both very helpful to my growth here on YouTube. If you have a suggestion or simply want to say hello, please leave a comment. I love to hear from you guys. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description, as are other ways to support the channel if you feel so inclined. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific, as often as I can. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate it beyond measure. And until next time, be good.